How do you mark the measure of a man? Is it the speed which he ran through the fields of his youth?
He's the fastest man I ever saw to get down to first base in a Phillies uniform.
There wasn't a shortstop in the major leagues could go in a hole and throw him out.
Is it the fierceness of his competitive nature?
Oh, he had a lot of fire. Oh, my, yes.
Whitey was a ruthless competitor.
Is it the sharpness of his wit and humor?
Rich was a very comfortable person to be around. He was very quick with his wit, and he was funny and fun and very sharp.
Is it his ability to embrace the things he cherished?
Richie had as much respect for the game of baseball as any player I ever met. He really was in love with the game.
He loved baseball, but he couldn't wait till the season ended so he'd go back and see his mom.
Is it his ability to charm an entire city, one so different from his birthplace?
I don't think there is another person in the history of this area who was more loved than Richie Ashburn. Maybe Ben Franklin, but he wasn't on the radio.
This city, for almost half a century, put him on a pedestal, and yet he kept coming down off the pedestal to be with you. That's what people loved about him.
Is it his ability to live far beyond the confines of his own mortality?
I can still hear his voice in my mind. I can still picture the gestures. I can still see the lit pipe.
He was taken away from us too soon, but we never lose the memories of him, and we can laugh forever.
Guy said to me, 33 years in the booth, and then, of course, the Hall of Fame, how does it feel to be an institution? I said to him, well, I wanted to be one before I got into one. It was a close race, believe me.
This is Harry Callis. For nearly half my life, I've been privileged to call Richie Ashburn my broadcast partner and colleague, but more importantly, my best friend. Whitey's life unfolded like a wonderful novel, from his storybook childhood in rural Nebraska to his days of glory on the diamond, from his years at the pulpit we call a broadcast booth to the hallowed halls of Cooperstown. In his 70 years of life, he touched millions of people in many, many ways. And the common thread was the game he loved so much. I'm honored to tell the story of my friend, Richie Ashburn, A Baseball Life. In the summer of 2007, Richard Ashburn Jr. made the long trek from Philadelphia to Tilden, Nebraska, the birthplace of a long line of Ashburns. Like the thousands of similar towns that dot the plains of the Midwest, Tilden is a world away from the gritty, bustling lifestyle of the Delaware Valley.
As far as I know, there's been 1,000 people in this town for the last 100 years. It's still a farming community, and it hasn't changed much from what I understand. I think the gas stations still have guys that run out and clean your windshield.
I don't think many people in Philadelphia can imagine how quiet it is and very, just countrified. Everybody loves it the way it is.
This is the house I remember as a kid, and this is the one we came to for holidays and stuff. Grandpa Neil and Grandma Toots' house. But yeah, I would say this is a pretty typical Nebraska small town home.
In the 1920s, Neil and Genevieve Ashburn settled down to raise a family. Neil was a blacksmith and monument maker in Tilden. Genevieve grew up on a nearby farm. She was a legendary cook and homemaker, yet her beautiful name was rarely used.
Well, because when she was born, she was just a tiny little thing, and they called her Tootie, and that stuck with her forever.
The family started out with 2 children, Bob and Betty. Then in March of 1927, a pair of twins entered the world, Donna and Don Ashburn. To avoid confusion, the boy was called by his middle name, Richard.
when he was a little kid, he'd be going down the sidewalk flipping up a ball, you know, catching. He had a ball with him about wherever we went. Betty even goes further than I do because their house set right where home plate is at Richie Ashburn Field.
I had heard that.
And her house set on first base.
Oh.
And her biggest story was, well, when they had to go to the bathroom, Rich had to go to third base, she had to go to second base. They were outdoor toilets.
His house was right at home plate. I think roughly within a year or two that house was torn down. This hall was made room for these fields. I guess this is where the outhouses stood.
Baseball was always part of the fabric of the Ashburn household. Father Neil played in a semi-pro league known in the region as Town Ball. Richie's brother Bob remembers.
When I was a kid, we all got in that old Model T every Sunday morning and drove clear over there on these gravel roads. It'd take us like 4 or 5 hours to get over there. And he'd get paid $15 a game, which was more than he made all week working at the blacksmith shop.
And while Neil played mostly for the love of the game, people began to see something special in his youngest son.
See, I was like 3 years older than Rich, and he was just that much better than guys my age.
Rich was at least a couple levels above the rest of us, you know. I can remember a number of times when he'd hit a single and three pitches later he scored.
Richie's father saw the potential for his son to go far in the game of baseball and felt that catching would be his quickest route to the pros. This rare footage shows an 11-year-old Richie donning the catching gear.
They did take me out there and set me up behind a batter. My brother would be the batter, and they put a mask on me. They wanted to get me used to a batter swinging at a ball and missing it and then catching it. And I never had any problem with that.
In fact, Neil Ashburn would not let him play football for fear of injury.
And I remember Dad saying that he wouldn't let him play football because he didn't want to see it. He knew he could get hurt.
He wouldn't allow him to play football,
Baseball
but he'd go down and scrimmage.
Would he?
He just well played, I guess.
Rich was a very good basketball player. Excellent, in fact. He was a guard. I mean, he could shoot from any place. I'll tell you, he could dribble the ball faster than most of us could run.
Besides his athletic pursuits, young Richie also worked at some interesting jobs.
He ran the projectors at the Victory Theater, and my dad owned it. That was his first business back in the 40s, and you can see this is July 22nd, 1944.
He was a lifeguard here once, and there was a story. There was a woman in town, and she was not a small woman, and Dad had to save her out of the pool. And he said once they got her out of the pool, he said, you know what? It would have been a whole lot faster to drain the pool.
Well, we had a great high school team in Tilden, Nebraska. The school didn't have enough money to buy us uniforms. They didn't have uniforms. They didn't have the material. They were all into the war. You know, those were the easy times and the good times. You just had fun playing baseball.
Before long, professional scouts began to notice a young catcher from Tilden. It's hard to imagine, but one of the greatest players in Phillies history almost went elsewhere.
When he was 16, he was signed to a contract by the Cleveland Indians. They mailed him one, and then they came to visit after that. He signed the contract. It was sent in to Major League Baseball, and Judge Landis heard about it and voided it because at the time, you couldn't sign a ball player until they graduated from high school.
At the age of 17, Richie was chosen to represent the state of Nebraska at a tournament in New York City called the Esquire Games. Started by the magazine of the same name, this prestigious series featured the best young athletic talent in America. At the games, Richie encountered Branch Rickey, architect of some of the greatest dynasties in the game, and considered by many to be the best judge of talent in baseball.
He said, son, if I were you, I'd go back to Nebraska and do what you're going to do before you want to be a ball player.
Richie returned home and entered Norfolk Junior College,
where he was scouted by about 13 of the 16 Major League teams at the time. So he was on the radar. And then evidently the Phillies were the ones, Eddie Cratchit came and signed him to a contract for a large bonus of $3,500.
He was soon on his way to Utica, New York to play for the Blue Sox, a minor league team filled with future major league talent.
They sent us down to Utica, New York, and Eddie Sawyer who they brought up later, was our manager. And I was 17, Richie was 17, Granny Hamner, Stanley Potter.
It was here that his legendary speed began to alter the course of his career.
He broke in as a catcher, you see, and after Sawyer saw how fast he could run, he made him an outfielder.
I heard Eddie Sawyer tell this story in Cooperstown, actually, for the induction weekend, the same exact story. Whitey was catching, and he would beat the runner to first base, backing up the play. He actually made a play at first base with a first base, and the pitcher wasn't covering. And Whitey ran down, actually cut in front of the runner, caught the ball at first base, and the guy was out.
Ashburn actually beat the runner to first base for the out. And when Sawyer saw that and the Phillies saw that, said, hey, we're going to have to make him a center fielder.
And after that, Eddie Sawyer decided, I'm going to put this boy in the outfield. And he said, but I had his father to worry about, because his father came down and pounded his fist on the table and said, what are you doing moving my boy from catcher to the outfield?
He said, Sawyer, how's my son going to be a Hall of Famer as an outfielder? They got so many. As a catcher, his daddy was mad at Sawyer for 3 or 4 months until he realized that Sawyer knew what he was doing. Squatting behind, you see, it ruined your legs. You can do that for 8, 10 years, and it slows you up. And Sawyer never wanted to see Richie slow up, you see, and that's how he wound up getting the Hall of Fame as an outfielder.
In the spring of 1948, Richie was slotted for another year in the minors, but he did get an invitation to big league camp.
Out of the clubhouse they come, the Fighting Phillies of 1948. Here's a club that could go places this year.
And I went to Clearwater, Florida. We stayed in an old hotel called the Phoenix Hotel in Clearwater, and I was assigned to a room, and when I went to that room, my roommate was Richie Ashburn, and that was in 1948, March 48. He was a different guy. I remember an interesting little story. We went to the movie, and it was a cowboy movie, and all of a sudden I hear the guy getting all over the bad guy. Get that dirty rascal. And then I looked up and it was Richie. He was into the movie. And
rookie kid comes to camp, and Harry Walker, the year before, led the league in hitting at 368 for the Phillies. But he held out. And Richie came. It was unbelievable. First day in spring training, hitting line drives all over the place. He was such a good hitter.
But something happened during spring. They put him in the ball game, and he just kept on playing like he was a veteran ball player right on, and they kept him. Yeah, he beat Harry Walker out, who led the league the year before, and that was quite a surprise. I'm sure a lot of people, and especially to Harry Walker.
Richie had never seen a major league game until his own debut, April 20th, 1948.
I was just awed by the number of people that were in the stadium. It was a sellout. It was about 36,000 people. I came from a town of around 1,000 people, and I had never seen that many people in one spot before.
It was his speed that quickly got him attention all around the league.
The speedy Ashburn gets the steal sign and slides into second with his 5th theft of the season, 4 against the Cubs.
If they played him normal and he hit a 2-hopper short, you couldn't throw him out.
He hit one bounce to you at shortstop. You better not juggle it a second, or he's gone. He's got you beat.
He's the best bunter I ever saw in the National League.
And the third baseman would come cheating in with less than 2 strikes, and then Richie would just slap the ball by him for a base hit.
Oh, his trademark was speed, something that you can't coach and you can't teach. Putt-putt, he could run like hell.
They called him White Mouse. That was his nickname in our day, and all he did was just show them he could hit.
Ashburn keeps his hot bat in the game with a hopper through the middle.
His bat control became another weapon in his arsenal.
He was a tough man to strike out. Therefore, he fouled off a lot of pitches, and whether he tried to foul them off or not, but it looked like it sometimes. And after a while, the pitcher, I guess, gets tired of pitching to him and says, well, here's one to hit it.
He had such bat control that you could end up playing 4 guys on the left-hand side of the infield, and he'd get it through there somehow. And one thing about Whitey, he worked the pitcher a lot, 3 and 2 a lot of times, walk, or then be able to get that base hit. He got a lot of them.
In a situation that seems almost unimaginable by today's standards, Neil and Toots Ashburn came to Philadelphia to live with their son. Toots became an unofficial den mother to a pack of talented Phillies rookies.
Mrs. Ashburn, Toots, she worked hard, and Neil was Richie's father. Of course, he talked baseball all the time. But she did the work and cooked, and I was 18, and we ate very well.
Richie was named the Sporting News Rookie of the Year in 1948, and just 2 years later became the spark plug of an exciting young team nicknamed the Whiz Kids.
We know them as the Whiz Kids, and we love them like matinee idols. As the city roars, the Whiz Kids fight their way to the top.
The fight,
The 1950 season came down to the last day, with the Phillies needing a win over the Brooklyn Dodgers to win the pennant. With no outs and the winning run on second, Whitey came up with the signature defensive play of his career.
Batter takes full cut. Line drive to center field. Ashburn races him with the ball. Here comes the throw from center field. He is out.
Oddly enough, people referred to that particular play probably more than any other thing I ever did in my career, and yet that was a very routine play at a very crucial time, but I made a lot better plays than that through my career.
I think, and most people would agree, was the greatest defensive play in Phillies history. It wasn't a catch, but it was a throw, and it saved the Phillies a pennant.
No, that was a beautiful throw, and turned out real well for us, and then it turned out great, especially in the 10th inning, when Dick Sisler hit the home run in the 10th inning with two guys on.
Fly very, very deep toward left field. Moving back, Abram, way, way back. He can't get it. It's a home run. A home run for Dick Sisler.
I remember when the game finished, Rob was on the mound. We all ran out there, and I saw Willie Jones and Ed Wiggins crying. I never saw them cry in my life, and I started crying too. And we all went out to the mound. It was quite a scene on the mound, and then we went into the clubhouse, and it was just fantastic with the champagne, and it was just tremendous.
In just 3 short years in the big leagues, the fair-haired boy from Nebraska found himself in the World Series. And with his innate sense of the historical significance, he documented the experience with his own 16-millimeter camera.
Comes to bat for the Yanks. He connects for his first hit of the series, and what a hit into the upper deck in left center field. It's Jolton Joe's 7th World Series home run, and it spells victory for the Yanks 2-1.
The Whiz Kids fell to the mighty Yankees in 4 games, all decided by 1 run. But the pennant-winning wonders had cemented themselves in the sporting lore of the city and made heroes of many of the stars.
I was a 4-year-old during the 50 World Series, and the truth be that the first television that came into my parents' house was in that September in order to watch the World Series games.
Well, my dad was a big Phillies fan, and would take me to the ball games when I was 5 and 6 years old, and of course we'd have the nightly catch. You become one of the Whiz Kids, you're Richie Ashburn, or...
I mean, I can still close my eyes and see him stepping into the batter's box, adjusting his hat. I can still see how he looked in the outfield. I mean, everything about him is very much stamped in my memory.
Somebody had done a drawing of Whitey sliding into home plate, and it was in my bedroom. So, hard to believe, as Whitey would say, that I went to sleep, with Whitey looking over my shoulder.
Just the image of him, I think, was very inspirational to a lot of kids like me.
cheer as he rounded the bases. And when he stepped up to the plate, right along with the smiles on our faces, we called him great. And he wore #1, like it was meant to be. Yeah, he wore #1 when he won the heart of the city.
It's well known that winning is the best glue to bond a team. The early success of the Whiz Kids made for great chemistry, as is evident in these home movies taken by Whitey during spring training. Whitey even sometimes filmed the opposition. I'll bet the splendid Splinter wouldn't want to see that swing again.
We used to get a lot of races for him because we know we'd win. We'd match him up against star players on other teams. We'd go over to play somebody in West Palm Beach, pick out their fast man. Hey, let's have a race, Ashburn. And, oh, yeah, that'll be good. We'd all bet 10, 15 bucks. But he would win.
I think he raced Mr. Carpenter at one time. Now, Mr. Carpenter loved Richie, but he also thought he was a speedster as well. There's rumors that they raced down the main street of Clearwater, and I'm not real sure about that one. But
my father loved Richie, and it was more than just an owner-player relationship. They were actually good friends. He had the same relationship with Robbie. And
I never saw anyone that won so happily as he did. I mean, he just would rub it in terribly.
Yet while young Richie was a pleasant and likable fellow, it was his inner fire that impressed his teammates.
Oh, he had a lot of fire. Oh, my, yes. He had a lot of fire in him, absolutely. He was a very, very, very tough competitor.
He was a bear-down guy, and he thought nobody could get him out, you know, and he hated pitchers and all that stuff.
I never particularly liked pitchers on the other team, and didn't like that many on our own team, to be honest with you, but...
He didn't think pitchers were very smart.
They cheat, you know, they spit on the ball, they cut the ball.
But God, he could get mad. Oh, he could get mad. And the pitcher never had anything. You know, when he made out, he said, "You don't have any, I don't know how you get me out." He was really, you couldn't believe how he was.
Sometimes they'd throw at me.
You could see the veins sticking out on his neck when he'd get excited and wanted to do something to somebody.
Come back to the dugout and he screamed, "How can you get anybody out with that stuff that you're throwing? That's terrible. You're throwing that crap up there." The guys in the dugout, "Yo, Rich, woo, calm down. He's allowed to get mad out there."
They're usually not guys with very good character, I don't think. I just would never trust a pitcher. I wouldn't want my daughter to marry a pitcher.
Prior to the 1950 season, Richie married a pretty young lady from nearby Battle Creek, Nebraska. Herberta Cox was a college classmate, and the two hit it off instantly.
We just met one day in the hallway, and he asked me out for a movie, and that's what we did. The first year we were married, I wasn't even allowed to go to spring training because that was Eddie Sawyer's rule. Wives didn't travel with the team at all.
Between 1951 and 1961, Herbie gave birth to their 4 daughters and 2 sons. Due to the rigors of big league travel, Whitey missed the birth of every one of his children. Or as he put it, "I was a miserable 0 for 6.
And you didn't really think anything about it because even if he had been there, he might have dropped me off at the hospital and he wouldn't have been allowed to stay. Or if he did stay, he would have certainly been in a waiting room. It just wasn't done.
The 6 kids bonded in the way that only a large family can. Philadelphia summers and Nebraska winters made for an interesting life.
We had teachers who taught our grandfather in Tilden.
We could walk from home to the school, our neighbors, and lots of play and a lot of fun. My grandparents, my cousins. That's what I remember the most about it.
After the season was over, then they would always move back. It was really fun. We were always glad when the cousins came back.
Mom needs all the credit because she really held things together.
Yeah.
So that he could do what he did.
Dad said many times that he could not have had the career he had without her. And he meant it from the bottom of his heart.
By the end of the 50s, Richie and Herbie built their modest dream house in Tilden.
I guess, he'd planned on raising the family here, and I know we have pictures and stuff, and then there were still cinder blocks around, so I guess it was either late 50s, early 60s when it was built. And I know we have pictures and stuff of the girls running around here, and boy, it's hard to believe that I'm back at the old place. There's no one here now. The house is for sale. I just remember sitting back here and Mom grabbing me, and we all went downstairs. A tornado was coming. I remember sitting on walls around here, the girls and Dad, and memories rushing in.
I remember him being gone a lot. I remember when he came home, it was always so much fun. I didn't really know that he was special to other people. I just remember him as kind of being Dad, and I didn't even know he played baseball.
I remember Richie saying one time, if he ever gets the big hit, all he has to do is go home. Get put back in his place.
He came home and he ran the vacuum cleaner. He didn't get any star treatment.
As a kid, I got to know Richie, and I think he always liked me because I never pestered him for autographs or anything. So I'd go over to the house when he'd get back playing baseball back when I was a kid. So I have some great memories.
We lived right next door to Richie, and there was a corner, and there was different ones. We'd play ball out in the road. And he taught me how to ride the bicycle. First time I got on it and he let it go, I fell off and hit a tree. His picture was on the Wheaties box, and he would bring the case of Wheaties home to us kids.
He's on his way, get on your way with Wheaties. 'Cause champions are made, not born.
Yes. This is Richie Ashburn, flashy young outfielder of the Phillies. Richie burns up plenty of energy in 9 innings. You look tired.
I am.
How about your regular big league bracer?
I'm on the way now. Come along. That does it. A Gillette shave is a bracer for sure.
Yes, shaving cream and a Gillette razor, the only way to get shaves that are quick, easy, and yes, sir, good looking.
Still gets plenty of Wheaties spark because Richie Ashburn, longtime Wheaties man, knows this important energy bonus. There's a whole kernel of wheat in every Wheaties flake. Now watch Richie earn his pay.
Of course, in those days, the owner and the player would sit down and negotiate about contracts because it was just very simple in those days. There weren't these huge addendums, and it was just a standard National League contract. And he and my father would have these horrible fights about how much money he should be paying. One year, Richie told me this. He said, "You're old man, I won a National League batting title," and he didn't even want to give me a raise.
League President Warren Giles on the left presents Richie with the traditional sterling silver bat and certificate. Ashburn posted a .338 average to win the crown.
As the decade of the 50s drew to a close, it became obvious that Richie Ashburn was one of the elite players in the game.
You can argue that Richie Ashburn was the greatest defensive center fielder ever. He had as many seasons of 500 putouts as all the other outfielders in history put together. He had a season where he led the league in hits, in walks, and batting average. It's only him and Rogers Hornsby. That's it.
He had over 308 years. And another point about Ashburn, between 1949 and 1958, he only missed 22 games, which is a pretty impressive figure.
He didn't fit the times. He didn't fit in with Mantle, Mays, Duke Snyder, all the big slugging center fielder of the time. But look at Whitey's career. I mean, Whitey led the league in a mess of categories. Whitey got more hits than any player in the 1950s.
It was post-segregation and pre-expansion, and he thought that that was the best era of baseball ever for those reasons, and that's why he was so proud that he had the most hits in that time frame.
But of course, probably the greatest Richie Ashburn feat of all time is spent all these years in Philadelphia, a town that doesn't like anybody, and everybody loved him.
Unfortunately, the Whiz Kids never quite lived up to the promise of 1950. Late in the decade, trade rumors began to swirl.
I got here on June 9th, 1959 to be the baseball writer. On June 10th, the sports editor asked me to call Ashburn at home. It was an open date, and ask him about the trade rumors. And here I'm a total stranger in town, and he never met me, never seen me. He was fine on the phone. He gave me a story. I was able to write it. And the next night they played and lost and fell into last place and never got out.
Richie, I know we have snow outside here in Nebraska, and your thoughts are turning rapidly to Florida and sunshine and baseball. There's been a lot of talk recently about your name arising in a trade deal between the Phils and the Cubs and the Cardinals. What's your opinion of that?
Well, I just kind of have a feeling that I'm going to be traded, Jack, but our general manager, Roy Hamey, I heard from him, and he says there's been no serious negotiations concerning me. Now, I don't know how he means that serious word, but there's been a lot of talk.
Richie was traded to the Cubs before the 1960 season. It was a good fit for the veteran outfielder, a Midwestern city closer to home, where all the games were played in the daytime.
I played against him when he was with the Cubs. I just remember, you know, this guy can still run, and he looks like he could play. He had that youngish face, and obviously could, you know, look like he could play for another 10 years, but that was not to be.
After 2 years with the Cubs, Whitey was selected by the New York Mets in the expansion draft. The Mets were created to fill the void in New York City left by the departure of the Dodgers and Giants in the 50s. Upon their arrival in 1962, they were greeted like heroes. But it wouldn't be long before the bloom was off the rose. Casey Stengel's team set the bar to a new low, losing a record 120 games, a total still unmatched today.
Richie Ashburn was voted most valuable Met by New York fans. A former batting king of the senior circuit, Richie still has some base hits in his bats, as evidenced by his .306 average. The New Yorkers find trouble when Ashburn gets trapped in a pickle. Although it wasn't easy, the Mets managed to lose 120 games for a new National League record.
And yet, as his career wound down, there were still a few milestones to achieve.
Hundreds and hundreds of players have played this game, but only 38 of them have had more base hits than this fellow you see right there, Richie Ashburn. And this is going on to center field for a base hit. Rounding third and coming home is Sammy State. Oh, he's holding up at third now. And that is an ovation for the announcement of the 2,500th base hit for Ashburn. He acknowledges the applause of the crowd. That was base hit number 2,500.
In the end, he was named the most valuable player on the worst team in baseball history. It was simply too much for a player with such great pride and competitive desire.
I said, Whitey, give me a rundown on how you could hit 300 and quit. He said, well, you know, we lost 120 games. And he said, I could see that we were probably going to lose another 110, 15 games. And the competitor that I am, I didn't want to go through that again.
I think I made the most of what I had in terms of ability, so I have no regrets at all about my major league career, and I'm not a bad guy.
Whitey was now faced with one of the most important decisions of his life.
I actually retired. I thought to go into politics. I was going to run for Congress out in the state of Nebraska. And when I was offered this broadcasting job in the off-season, I turned it down.
And they said, well, don't give us a flat no on this yet.
you know, think about it for a month. It was in the wintertime, so we had some time. So I thought about it. I thought, well, you know how it is when January rolls around and February rolls around and you get that baseball itch. Well, that's what I got. And I said, hey, I'm going to try this.
I broke Richie in 1963 in Clearwater. And that business about it's an easy game. He said that to me in the little booth in Clearwater. He said, boy, it looks like an easy game from here.
There was a great deal of resistance. Not necessarily from the audience, but from the advertisers who weren't sure. The fact that Richie had played baseball and was popular didn't necessarily mean that he would be a great broadcaster.
Richie was really afraid of the camera and afraid of the microphone for about the first half of the first year.
In the beginning, Richie wasn't objective. He wasn't impartial. He didn't divorce himself from the clubhouse and what went on in that. He didn't become just, you know, an announcer.
I don't think I was very good at the start in terms of style and techniques and rhythm and flow and that kind of thing. I think the thing that saved me was the fact that I was popular here in Philadelphia as a player, and people kind of hung in there with me.
Rich listened very well and picked up by osmosis a lot of the ways to do, and he did improve in a whole year's time. He was much better.
It wasn't easy. It was groundbreaking, and there was certainly resistance from different quarters about, not Richie necessarily, not Richie, but about former ball players feeling that they could now be broadcasters. How the world has changed.
Whitey's decision to pursue a career in broadcasting seemed to be a grand slam. But there was still a family that would have to leave their quiet Nebraska lifestyle and move to the big city.
Jan was 9 years old when we left, and I thought it was pretty prophetic for a 9-year-old to say to me, Mom, as we drove away from the house, I realized it was just a house. All the people were gone. I thought that was, for a 9-year-old, I thought that was pretty wise.
But a world of wonders seemed to open up as the Ashburn kids had free run of old Connie Mack Stadium.
Dad would take us down and we'd park off to the side. Like everybody else in the streets, there were no parking lots. And I remember a big cop named Charlie used to escort us in and protect Dad's car. And
Connie Mack I'm glad I got to experience it. I think it was such a neat park. I didn't appreciate my father's career when I was that young. I certainly do now. When I was that young, Willie Mays was my favorite player. And I remember going to a Giants game with my dad, and he took us downstairs, and you could, you know, it's that Field of Dreams thing. It's the scenery where the light, and you see the green field at the end of the tunnel, and we're walking into the visitors' dugout. And right there is Willie Mays and Willie McCovey. And it was one of the greatest days of my life.
To sit on that long press box along the third baseline, like we died and gone to heaven. But we had no idea. The radio booth then was so small. It was a whole ticker tape box, if I remember correctly, and Bill Campbell and by Sam. And boy, did we have the run of the place.
And smelling the hot dogs, and then there's the green grass and the dirt.
You go from first base to third base, and where I guess an adult's view of us was, wow, look at those nicely dressed, well-behaved children. We're like, look at this dump. This is great. Free junk food. Great.
The wood seats, we didn't care about any of the old things falling apart. It was just the perfect site for baseball, and I always liked it. Now that we kind of have it back with this ballpark, it brings a lot of that back.
I'm Rich Ashburn, and 20 years ago this spring, I showed up in Clearwater, Florida, a scared rookie out of Tilden, Nebraska, trying to make the Phillies ball club.
And even though Richie no longer wore the uniform, he was never far away from healthy competition. Early in his Phillies career, the 20-year-old Richie Allen challenged the 40-something Richie Ashburn to a foot race and lost.
It was close. It was very close. Matter of fact, they made us do it twice, but he beat me on both times. I was wondering why he retired. I really did.
In 1964, a young man named Larry Shanks started with the Phillies as the public relations director.
I told Whitey one time that Del Ennis was my childhood hero. Well, why?
you know, as Whitey could say. And I said, well, he drove in the runs. And I could see Whitey starting to boil, you know. He said, well, who do you think was on base all the time for Dell, you know?
And you know, one of the great things about Whitey is you could hear this competitive drive with him. I think that fueled his broadcasts. It never changed him, and it never changed the way he did a broadcast, but it fueled it in a lot of ways.
My first job at the Phillies was to follow up on Richie's season ticket sales, and he was on commission. And boy, did he, you know, remind me that that his whole livelihood was on the line, and that I better deliver on, you know, on completing the sales that he had set up. And I mean, here I'm working for the Phillies less than a week, and I'm already sort of hanging with Richie Ashburn. I mean, that was just, think of that as a fan. I mean, it just, wow.
Dad would one moment be conversing with a janitor, the next moment he's with a CEO somewhere, and he treated them the same, and they treated him.
He never liked people making a big fuss about him. It was that small town guy, you know. He's a small town kid, you know, coming from Tilden and into a big city, and he brought a lot of that charm with him.
By the end of the 60s, the Phillies had fallen on hard times. The ball club seemed mired in the second division, and Connie Mack Stadium had become a victim of urban decay. The final game marked a sad death knell for the once proud ballpark that had seen so much history. Yet miles to the south, a new landmark was being completed, and with it a new era of Phillies baseball was about to begin. The year was 1971, and I was hired to join the Phillies broadcast team and usher in the new Veterans Stadium. Unfortunately, I was replacing the very popular Bill Campbell. It was a tough situation, made more bearable by the ease and grace of my new broadcast partner, Richie Ashburn. We all made the best of a difficult situation, and it was the start of a beautiful relationship.
Overcast skies tonight and a crowd on hand, expected to be around 35,000 for tonight's second game of the series, and it should be a good one.
Well, I thought they were a tremendous pair together. I think Whitey knew baseball. I think he helped Harry as far as learning the game. I think the two personalities together in the booth created a great combination.
That's the way they should make teams that broadcast. They had no hang-ups with each other, and he was just telling them like he thought it was, you know, got on umpires and got mad at pitchers.
I think they were great for one another. They were best of friends, and I think the tandem of the two announcing just worked very well. Harry was the great, you know, hands-on, and Whitey was the color guy that just always had a nice anecdote or something about the game. And
enjoying this fine day here at Wrigley Field.
Supposed to rain tomorrow here, though.
Well, we'll be in Houston, Whitey.
Oh, my mother out in Nebraska, and that rain is headed this way that they're having now.
Do you smell it at all, or
no?
And I don't think there was ever any broadcast combination that was as good as the two of them. It's so hard to listen because you listen and you wait for you hear a pause. And with Dad and Harry, you just knew. You just always knew something was coming.
Like the scoreboard has gone off here at Shea Stadium.
Good thing you're working with an announcer that never forgets the count.
Where chemistry really works, as well as I think at any time in any franchise, was of course Harry Kalas and Whitey Ashburn. A fan could not get enough of this because they obviously liked, in fact, they loved one another. They were best friends.
It was so much fun for them, and they had such a great dialogue. And they, you know, I'd be watching the game on Wrigley Field, and you know, Richie would say, you know, Mrs. Souderton from Conshohockins here, and she sent us a case of Tasty Cake, you know, and Harry would be like, yeah, that's great, Whitey, you know. Well, it was just, they had this great repertoire.
Happy 81st birthday to Mildred Cummer in Trumbowersville, PA.
Which was tougher, the last name or the city?
Soupy Sales, you mean that loon that talks to White Fang and Blacktooth?
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't he the ding-dong who always gets hit in the face with a whipped cream pie?
You mean like this way?
Yeah, I thought that was him. I don't think he's very funny.
By the mid-70s, the Phillies began to show signs of being a powerhouse in the league. A core group of young players led the team to championship caliber play.
Rich, here we go, 1978.
That's right, Harry, and I believe that this is the best Phillies ball club that I've seen in Philadelphia. Almost everybody picks them to win. They have won their division title the last 2 seasons, and I think that if they don't do more than that this season, however, a lot of people are going to be a little disappointed.
In the middle of this success, a certain rumor began to surface. Could it be Richie Ashburn to manage the Phillies?
I could see the Phillies developing an excellent ball club, and I thought that I could help that team come along as a manager.
And the great thing about Whitey was he wasn't impressed about who you were, whether you were the lowest guy on the roster or the so-called star of the team. He would tell you what he thought. And I like that. I appreciated that.
I used to kid him and say the only problem with hiring you as manager would be that someday I'd probably have to fire you. And we used to joke about that, but
Ruley made a very good point. And Pope was smart enough baseball guy to know he didn't want to be the one to have to fire Richie Ashburn if things didn't work out.
Although his aspirations to manage the ball club might never reach the serious stage, there was one other pursuit he took to heart.
As I recall, he was a journalism major in college. The Bulletin had other athletes do columns before. So they had this idea that they wanted to get a baseball presence in there, so they went to Richie. He could talk to a guy, and a guy would basically ghostwrite the column for him. And Richie would not accept it on those terms. Richie said, if I'm going to do a column, I want to write the column. And I thought, good for you. You know, I mean, that told me a lot about Richie, that he was not somebody that wanted to take the easy way out. Rich turned out to be a fine writer. And what impressed me about it was that he really worked at it. He didn't just sit down and just dash it off, which he could have done. I mean, who on our copy desk was going to tell Rich Ashburn what he should say about baseball?
Whether in print or on the broadcast, Whitey was never one to mute his opinions. And yet his close bond with the men in red pinstripes was rarely strained.
He always used to, when he greeted me, say, "Gary Maddox, how does it feel to be the second best center fielder in Phillies history?"
Well, Whitey told it like it was, that's for sure. He'd tell it to you right to your face. And he did to me a bunch of times.
You know, Whitey might say, "Hey, Schmitty, let me tell you something. If it's close enough to call, it's close enough to swing at." So, you know.
I felt very special because he told me I was one of the few pitchers that he appreciated. He didn't necessarily say he liked, but he appreciated my work. And
he didn't like pitchers, but he liked pitchers that could hit. And so he liked to talk to me about hitting, never about pitching, but only about hitting and a few other things.
And how he delivered everything made it seem like he was not doing anything but offering you his his sincere feelings. And when you bring those types of credentials to the table as well, it really says a lot.
3-2 pitch. McBride bounces one into right field, base hit. Rose rounding second is going to third, and he's going to try and score, and he does! Oh, brother!
1980 was a tumultuous year for the ball club. This talented group of players seemed to underachieve for most of the season, but come September, they put on a torrid stretch drive and caught their division rivals. On a cold Saturday in Montreal, they needed one win to clinch the NL East. Whitey was assigned to call the seventh inning by himself. With such huge stakes on the line, his emotions began to boil to the surface.
Green light, base hit, center field. The Phillies are going to go ahead. Now they got Schmidt in a rundown, 2-run score. Schmidt's in a rundown, still in a rundown. And they get Schmidt, and now they're trying to get Lisinski. They do! Unbelievable! A double play, but the Phillies go ahead 3-2. I don't believe it. Oh, he dropped him! I don't believe it! I don't believe it! Pitch out, he is safe. Oh, no! I don't believe it. Another error.
But destiny was on the Phillies' side that year. And before long, we were all celebrating in a wild clubhouse.
It's the best baseball these guys have played since I've been around. The best.
So, that's about it from Olympic Stadium in Montreal, where the Phillies clinched it. The Eastern Division, winning 6-4 on Mike Schmidt's 2-run EO 11th inning home run. Doug McGraw winning it. Gene McCurdy, I'll need a new blazer next year.
Tim McCarver was a rookie broadcaster that fateful summer.
I think whoever wins this game is going to win this thing.
I don't agree.
Okay.
I don't
Why?
agree. I think you got to win 2 more to win it, Harry.
No kidding.
Little did he know he would be behind the mic for perhaps the greatest league championship series in history.
And the Stories throw. He knocks over Bochy, and the Phillies take a 4-3 lead.
Even in one of the most crucial games in Phillies history, Timmy seemed to bring out the funny side of his whiteness.
I don't think they pay you enough to get behind the plate, Richie.
You were paid plenty.
What do you mean I was paid plenty?
Probably overpaid. Only caught once a week. I don't mean that. Listen, I think you had a great career. Too bad you didn't realize it was over a couple of years sooner.
Look at that ball club. We'll be going down to the clubhouse shortly. The Phillies have won at 10, and they're being mobbed. The Phillies are in the World Series. Gary Maddox, you're beautiful. You are beautiful, buddy.
As the town celebrated its first pennant since the Whiz Kids, Richie had to face a bitter irony. The broadcasting rights to the World Series were set up so that local broadcasters were not permitted to do the games. Whitey and I watched from the press box as the greatest moment in Phillies history went without a call.
2 strikes on Willie Wilson. Bases loaded. 2 outs. The crowd will tell you what happens.
Phillies fans protested the outrage so vehemently that the rule was changed the following year. It was a wonderful gesture by the most passionate fans in sports. Following the 1980 championship, a huge burden seemed to be lifted from the ball club. They had finally reached the promised land. People could exhale.
It took away some of the ghosts that had been following us all around, and maybe even a little stigma attached to that 50 World Series. Well, this is all over now.
Whitey settled into his role as the wise old sage, the kindly professor who would teach generations of Philadelphians the game of baseball.
He was the person who taught me about baseball. When you listen to his broadcasts on the radio or the TV, it had an incredibly comforting effect.
I learned so much about baseball from Whitey and Harry. I think it was his demeanor. He always came across as sort of a friend.
Television broadcasters particularly become part of the family of any fan of that particular sport, no matter what sport, but particularly baseball, because it's there 162 games a year. And people, I'm sure, all around the Delaware Valley considered Richie as one of their family members because he was there in the room, in the kitchen, and the bar, wherever. And
there was an ease and a grace to Whitey. There was a comfort zone. I always thought of Whitey as a great uncle that I never had.
You not only learned the game, but you learned his take on the game, which was very irreverent in one sense. But while his take on it was irreverent, he never lost his respect for the game. So he combined respect with irreverence, and that's pretty cool.
If the game, or perhaps even the season, wasn't quite going well, you could always count on Whitey for entertainment.
Here's Wilson's catch on Law's ball, and Willie ran right to that mirror and said, "Nice catch, you handsome devil."
There weren't rules for Whitey. He just, whatever it was there.
I like Joe West. Joe West
One thing about him, he can umpire.
Yeah, he's a good umpire.
I don't think I'd want him for my father-in-law, but...
You're right. Come on, Whitey, say something. Say, let something go. Let it fly.
Padres and Jim Fregosi talking it over. Larry Boa listening in. Look at Boa's eyes.
Would you buy a used car from Larry Boa?
He's such a good announcer. Like most guys hear a bad announcer and they think, oh, he must be a former player, you know. But Whitey was so good, and him and Harry together were just unbelievable.
3 bells on the field right now. Jay hitting, wanted short, Wally umping at first. 1-2 pitch, curveball, grounded to Juan Bell. Bell throws, and Wally Bell calls Jay Bell out. 1 down.
Casey Stengel once said, when he was trying to remember Gus Bell's name, he said, well, this lineup, that ought to ring a bell, and yes, sir, that's his name.
He was still passionate about the Phillies, and if he saw something on the field that he didn't like, he would say it. And if the team was losing, even though the reason that he gave might not be exactly what happened, he might blame somebody else for it, the umpires or the weather.
A disgrace to call that pitch a strike. Wheels.
He was our voice, our companion, our buddy, who would say on the air what we were thinking.
Why would a pitcher throw that pitch when the guy had just gone after 2 pitches in the dirt blowing outside? Why would you throw a pitch like that? I don't understand it, Wheels.
He was not one of those guys that was fond of pitchers. They were all bad. They're all terrible. They stink. This guy, who is, it's just...
Well, Terry Mulholland seems to have an inning every game that they feel he loses his concentration and struggles in it.
You know, one way to work on a guy's concentration is to slap him alongside the head once in a while.
You want to slap this guy alongside his head?
No, not me. John Vukovich do that.
There were times where I'd say to myself, did he just say that? Is that so?
Now you got to watch Walker at second. There he goes.
There he goes. A throw to third. Late drop.
I don't know how people stand this, Harry.
And it just pissed him off to no end when people didn't play the game right. You didn't move a runner. Worst at bat ever. That's the worst at bat I've ever seen. You're like, oh God, I was trying, but but that's the thing. Like, as a player, you expect that from an announcer who played.
But you could hear that competitive drive and that competitive fueling of what was going on the field that made him mad. Because this had happened or something, and you could almost feel him thinking that there is no way that would have happened if I was down there.
He would say some night when Phillies hitters were not connecting against a pitcher that he didn't think was particularly strong, he'd say, boys, I could go down there right now and get 3 hits off this guy.
Here's the 2-1 pitch. Long drive, deep left field. First major league home run for Kevin Flora.
I'm out of here, Harry. I'm going down and grab a bat. I
think he was pretty good at holding back his emotions. If you were in the booth with him, you could see his reaction rather than hear it. If a manager made a decision that was he didn't agree with, or a player made a foolish base running error, the hands would go up and he'd throw them down, or the hat would fly off, or the pipe would rattle against the countertop.
One of his pet peeves, and I used to do it to him all the time, we'd have men on first and third and a pitcher coming up, and he hated the bunt. He hated a bunt in that situation.
I don't even want to talk about this play, Harry. Don't want to talk about it.
I know you don't. You hate this play.
Hate this play. Cannot believe that play. With runners first and third, 1 out, you say, here, fellas, here's the second out. It's all yours. Baloney.
Every once in a while, of course, Whitey would make a little mistake, and we'd correct it as gently as possible, and he would say, "Just testing you to see if you noticed that."
Whitey's line with me was always, "Timmy, what do you know about, and, you know, what do you know about this guy?" When he was working play-by-play. And I would start scrambling, and you could hear the sheets of paper going in the background. And Whitey would say, "A good analyst ought to know that without having to look through all this stuff." And I said, "Yeah, well, it's stuff that you never look through, and that's why you put all the heat on me."
We'd always talked about Celebri's Pizza. So we would drop Celebri's Pizza on the air, and they would bring it without question. It didn't matter what time of the day or night, they would bring a pizza. We were told to cut it out because for whatever reason they had somebody else who was a sponsor. We couldn't do it. So this one night we were really hungry. I mean, really hungry. So he and I talked between innings, how are we going to get this done? He says, "Leave it to me. I'll handle this." So we go on the air. He said, "I'd like to send this birthday wish along to the Celebri's twins, Plain and Pepperoni."
How old is that pepperoni Celebri's?
I hope about 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, the guys were in the back of our booth with the pizza from Celebri's.
Dykstra ground ball to third. Ouch. Bit my tongue, Wheels.
Either had a mouthful of popcorn, or when he didn't have the mouthful of popcorn, he would be, and it used to drive Ray Tipton crazy.
You could hear the match strike the book, and then you naturally hear him sucking the pipe to get the thing lit. And if it wasn't too bad, I wouldn't say anything because it's going to happen.
He always knew when he was firing up. That was unmistakable.
But I would say to him in his ear, ease up on the pipe, Whitey. I'd basically say the same thing every time.
Richie, get it away from the microphone.
And then during commercial, you'd say, "How do you know that I'm lighting up this pipe? There's no way." I said, "I can hear you. And if I can hear it, then everybody in the audience can hear it, Whitey." "I don't believe that."
And camera-toting fans are permitted on the field beginning at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. Compliments of Fuji Phil. Tough to work up here some days. And Harry Callis with us. Harry,
would you pack that pipe, please?
Well, give me a time. I will.
You know, from the time I was, probably before I can remember, I was going up there with him, and, you know, obviously there's pictures of me sitting there next to him with the headphones on, and, you know, I thought I was talking into the mic and broadcasting with him, but I think they probably turned that one off. But, yeah, I remember doing that and walking in there, and, you know, Harry would always go, "Here's the great Christian," and...
Nice little children in the booth to us, Wheels. I know you hate kids, but they look like nice little kids to me.
Say something like that on the air. I would have friends come up to me all the time and say, "Is your grandfather all right? You know, did he mean to say that last night?" And, you know, what do you say? I mean, yeah, it's just the way he is.
Because he brought fun to the game. It's only a game, Harry. I mean, Richie realized it was a game, and he was going to have some fun broadcasting it.
Richie gave the viewing and listening public credit for having some degree of common sense and some degree of common knowledge. The game isn't that hard. You don't need some guy explaining the 2-finger and the 4-finger and this. You don't need all that. You can really do without it. They're interested in the basic, rudimentary fundamentals of the game, which every red-blooded American guy pretty much understands anyway.
It really made listening a pleasure. You didn't have to hear all the hard numbers and statistics. You could listen to Richie ramble about Tilden, Nebraska, and his aunts and his school teachers. And that's what made it fun, and that's what people loved so much about Richie.
I got a question to ask you. You guys get paid for this? I don't believe it.
That's the one thing that's always amazed me about this business, is that they pay you for it.
I'll always believe you did this for the love of the game. You gotta love the game.
In 1987, the storybook life of Richie Ashburn was suddenly shattered. While in spring training with the ball club, Richie received the phone call that is every parent's worst nightmare. His daughter, Jan, was killed in a single car accident near Philadelphia.
I was sitting there with him, and we're watching the basketball, and I guess it was somewhere getting close to around 11 o'clock, and the phone rings, and we're kind of like, we both looked at each other like, kind of odd time for the phone to ring. And he went into his bedroom, answered it, and came out. I've never seen my father cry before, and you know, that was obviously something, I knew something was wrong, and he said, Jan's dead, and we both, you know, kind of lost it at that point. But
she was a very dear person. She was actually so much like her dad too. She was like she'd been cloned from him or something, her personality and her looks, and she was so vibrant.
There was something about her that, you know, he knew she had something extra, and she was very close to Dad. Those two together, they would do crosswords together. And
she was a fun person. She had a great sense of humor. She was a fun person and a pretty girl.
You know, that was just such a tragedy, and the feeling that somebody so young was gone from us. It was a tough time for him, and his friends knew how tough it was for him.
The following year, in a ceremony in his honor, Richie acknowledged the outpouring of sympathy and affection from the Phillies fans.
The thing that has touched me the most is when we when we lost Jan, the thousands of cards and letters that shared our loss. And she would have enjoyed this tonight. I don't know how long I'm going to be hanging around this business, but I hope it's a while yet. And I really can't thank you all enough for this night. I'll never forget. Thank you.
While his days of foot racing younger athletes had long passed, Richie's competitive fire still burned high. Whether on the golf course, the tennis court, or a friendly card game, Whitey was always a force to be reckoned with.
There wasn't any sport known to man that he didn't like. That's why I took up golf. I was a widow of every sport known to man.
So he's never done anything he wasn't the best at. You know, he's the best baseball player, best announcer, he's the best bunter, best card player. Everything he did, he was the best. And he would tell you.
Card playing, he was fun, and he loved to play. Oh, he could make a couple of bucks playing cards. He was happy as could be.
We played thousands and thousands of hands of gin rummy on airplane flights.
I was impressed beyond, you know, imagination when he could do the New York Times crossword puzzle in pen and get it all right. He was just an amazing person.
In my 30s and early 40s, I played a lot of tennis, and I remember Richie once played, it was me and I forget who, maybe it was Dave Montgomery, which probably explains the story, but he played singles against the two of us. The two of us had to cover the singles court. He covered the doubles court and still crushed us. I mean, absolutely, it wasn't even close.
And towards the end of my career, I remember him just killing me in tennis.
And we used to play a couple times a week during spring training down there. And I'm in my 20s, he was 65, and he would beat me most of the time.
And on the golf course, particularly, he was fun because he was not really a great golfer. I mean, I could even beat him in golf.
Whenever I saw him play golf or played with him, he would get frustrated, but he still, his wit, his charm, everything came out. He mastered that part and making it look like, you know, he was actually a better golfer than he was.
Like everything else, he had this will to make it happen, and so it was almost like Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking, and as he approached a putt, And I did not remember him to be a particularly good putter, but boys, this is the perfect distance.
But every time he had a putt, he had his pipe or sometimes a cigar in his mouth, and he would get over that putt left-handed, and he said, "This is a lock, boys."
The thing about him that always made me laugh was everything was boys.
He said, "Boys, I'm not going to lie, I'm the best bunter I've ever seen."
Read 'em and weep, boys. It didn't matter. It was always, there was always something that always ended with boys.
And then, if indeed he did miss it, there was this phooey, and he, just be furious at himself that he couldn't drain a putt.
He shanked the ball, and he goes, "Did you see that one, boys? I think it's right down the middle." It's shanked straight left. That can't be my ball. I hit it right down the middle.
Always played with that cigar in his mouth, and I don't know how he never burned his shirt, because I couldn't do that, Well, I always take that swing, have that cigar hanging over that right shoulder,
Whitey, number one, was one of the great competitors. I mean, if all you had to do was get him on the golf course, and his squash playing was legendary. His tennis playing, particularly with Lenny Dykstra, I think Dykstra still owes him a ton of money.
Dad used to play a lot of tennis with Lenny, and there's some amazing stories about Dykstra.
A lot of tennis rackets that were broken, and they weren't my dad's.
And Whitey would be out there, and we'd play tennis, and we had a little wager on it every spring, and he used to have to spot me games. That's how good a tennis player he was, but he would outrun me out there.
He didn't hit, really hit it hard, but he just moved it all over the place, and he just wore it Dykstra out. That was kind of a joke.
It was amazing, and I enjoyed it. I actually looked forward to playing with him and competing with him. I mean, me and him had battles almost to the point of fighting.
Dykstra couldn't believe that a 65-year-old man was kicking his butt in tennis.
I said, "Man, you let a damn 90-year-old man beat your ass at tennis. He cheats. I'm telling you, he cheats."
I broke a lot of rackets because of him.
1993 was a special year in Phillies history. An improbable team of throwback players led the Phils to another pennant. This was a team of characters, gamers who left it all out on the field. The type of players Whitey loved. 93 was filled with many memorable games, but none more so than a rainy night in July. It was an important doubleheader, and the second game didn't start until well after midnight.
This would be a bad hour for most folks, Harry. This is a shank of the evening for you and most of us. I mean,
oh, yeah.
Expect a real great ball game out of you.
Here's a ball hit well to deep left field. It is gone.
Whoa, what's going on here? This looks like a cakewalk for Andy Bennis. Now all of a sudden it's a ball game.
3-0 pitch. Swing, ground ball, base hit, right field. Here comes Hollins. Billy Bean's throw is late. Hollins scores the tying run.
Never had this much excitement at 4 o'clock in the morning.
So Tommy Green, the pinch runner, now is 90 feet away from winning this game. The 2-2 pitch. Wild pitch. Here comes Green. Throw to the plate. He's out at home plate. Extra innings, Whitey?
Oh, well, let's go about 16. I have a tennis match at 9. I'll just go right from here to the court.
Williams' lifetime, 2 for 15. One of them a homer. Hit it off Don Assi.
Where's Don Assi when we need him?
And the pitch. Swing and a base hit to left center field. Hank Avilia's going to score. This game is over. On an RBI hit by Mitchie Poo. The Phils have won it 6-5 and 10 on the Wild Things RBI hit. Can you believe it? The 93 Phillies gave the city many thrills that summer, and although they came up just a bit short of a world championship, they will be forever remembered as one of the most beloved teams in Philadelphia history. Wacky, wonderful bunch of throwbacks has won the National League pennant and go on to the World Series.
As you know, for many years he wrote a newspaper column here in Philadelphia. He also, of course, was a broadcaster, as we all know. Whitey used to say, you know, boys, I might be the first guy ever not to make the Hall of Fame in 3 separate categories.
A glance back at the playing career of Richie Ashburn revealed a volume of statistics that should have qualified him for the Baseball Hall of Fame. But year after year, he was passed over. By the early 90s, he was taken off the ballot, an injustice caused by a change in the rules of eligibility.
This was Richie's 54th hit of the year and sent his average well above the 300 mark, third best in the league.
It seemed like his entrance to Cooperstown would be blocked forever. Yet one fan, whose life Richie had touched years before, had a plan.
Well, in 1957, I got to meet my boyhood hero, Richie Ashburn. It was a 30-second event. Richie probably wouldn't remember it of all the events he experienced over the course of time, but those 30 seconds meant a lot to me. I thought basically I was the Joe Average fan. And if I felt Richie belonged in the Hall of Fame and I thought it was an injustice, I thought maybe there might be a lot of other Joe Average fans out there that thought the same way I did. Obviously, I didn't have the resources to start anything in Madison Avenue campaign, so whatever it was going to be very basic. And in fact, that's what it was. It was bumper stickers and petitions and basically Richie Ashburn, why the hall not? My campaign was to get that rule overturned. Once that rule was overturned, I had no doubt in my mind that Rich would either go in 1994 with Lefty or go in 1995 with Mike Schmidt. But regardless which one it was going to be, it was going to be a heck of a time in Cooperstown.
In the spring of 1995, the call from Cooperstown finally came through. And the first person Richie would call was his mother, Toots, back in Nebraska.
I wasn't worried about me dying, I was worried about you dying.
In my 50th year of professional ball, that happened this year. And of course, it'll be nice to go in with Michael Jack.
We have to treat you any differently now?
Yeah, a lot of respect, a little respect.
And as is typical of Richie Ashburn, he spent the next few months downplaying the importance of his new honor.
He knew that he should have made it, but he always contended that it changed his way of life. We used to ride to the ballpark in the car together sometimes, and he used to complain about the fact that in the old days he'd come outside and there'd be 5 people waiting for autographs, and now there were 25. He says, this Hall of Fame is ruining my life. And I said, Whitey, being in the Hall of Fame validates your career. I don't need my career validated, he said.
You know, I just may not go to Cooperstown. What do you think about that? You know, because this is ridiculous, this long. I said, Whitey, if you don't go to Cooperstown, you're going to be robbing your family of the greatest day of their life. And well, we'll see, you know.
I feel very fortunate to have, you know, received this honor. But they didn't exactly carry me in there on sedan chairs either, you know.
As the induction weekend at Cooperstown drew near, it became obvious that this would be one of the greatest events in Phillies history. A pre-induction ceremony at the vet helped set the tone.
Just want to say, since I came here in 1948, best thing that ever happened to me, to play here in Philadelphia. To play for the Carpenter family, to work here 33 years as a broadcaster for the greatest band in the country.
He was there in our shiny new Buicks and in our beat-up old Chevrolets, on our front steps and our kitchen tables to end our days. And he wore #1 like it was meant to be. Yeah, he wore #1 when he won the heart of the city.
The weekend at Cooperstown was simply magical, made more special by the Ashburn entourage, filled with Whitey's family and friends.
It was just like fairyland. Nobody could ask for anything to have been better. It was just fantastic.
They make the inductee family and the inductee feel so special. They really do. And that was a great party.
It was like Philadelphia went to Cooperstown, the sea of red and white. You walked through this town, it was awesome.
The whole weekend you could just see them filing in, and the town was all Phillies hats. Because Schmitty, obviously going in with Dad, was a perfect scenario.
He was really a breath of fresh air, and I was so pleased to enjoy the Cooperstown induction with Whitey Ashburn.
My grandma Toots came from Nebraska,
she was here.
and
She was like,
held court like the queen.
She was like she was in heaven, being around all the boys again.
It was awesome. Well, because Dad always would downplay the fact that he wasn't in and had accepted the fact that he wasn't in. It was okay with him. But when you saw that weekend, it wasn't okay with him. He was so happy to be in.
Dad always said he wouldn't belong to a club that would have him, and he talked about the Hall of Fame induction kind of being like sprinkling perfume on a hog. And yet we were on the bus, and you could see him turn and look out at the sea of red and white.
The moment that I could see that really struck Dad is when we were on the bus and we were pulling in, and wow, it looked like the ballpark was there. I don't know how many people, they said 30, 50,000, something like that, but it was a sea of red, and I could see Dad becoming emotional at that point.
And I saw him kind of tear up, and I think that's when I realized how much it did matter to him.
Can't believe the number of people here today. Happy to see it. Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. Have a lot of Nebraska people here. One of them I have to introduce to you. Mom? 91-year-old mother. Who believe me is a saint. Ideally for me, this could have happened earlier because my father's passed away. Hang on. My twin sister passed away, and we had a daughter. But on the other hand, our grandchildren are here. They wouldn't have been here 20 years ago. I want to thank these guys back here who have made me feel so comfortable. I really didn't feel that comfortable coming up here. It's no secret. They didn't exactly carry me in here in a sedan chair with blazing or blaring trumpets. So I was a little shaky about joining this select group. And they have really been nice to all of us here, and I appreciate it. Everybody that had a part of it, God bless them, especially the fans. You have made this the greatest day of my life.
Whitey was now a member of the most exclusive club in the game. His bronze plaque a symbol of baseball immortality. But few of us were aware of how fragile his own mortality would be. Richie had suffered from diabetes for many years. He was able to keep his condition in check well enough to play golf and tennis into his late 60s. But the ravages of the disease were slowly taking their toll.
His eyes were bothering him, and I had no idea that the heart was in in that bad of, I mean, it was troubling. It really was troubling to watch.
In early September of 1997, the Phillies prepared for a road trip to Montreal, then on to New York City. No one was prepared for what was about to happen.
Don Drysdale had passed away, I guess, in a hotel room in Montreal. And I remember it was not long after that, my father's quote was, I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to die on the road.
Fly ball right field. Husky over his head. That's going to score a couple. A double for Kevin Jordan. What an at-bat by Kevin Jordan, and the Phillies now leading.
His last game at Shea Stadium. I'm on the train, and I look over, and there's Whitey sitting on the train. So we go up to the Grand Central, to the Hyatt, and we're going up the escalator, and I said, he says, "Well, Tipper, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow." And I said, "You going to take the train? I'll be down here at such and such a time." He pauses and he says, "Don't wait for me." And then he laughed and giggled and then went up the elevator. And that was the last I saw him.
I was out in the middle of a pond I was fishing. It was pretty early in the morning, and one of the guys that works for us in South Carolina, he comes rushing up to the pond in his pickup truck, and I knew something was wrong. Lee Thomas called me around 4:30 in the morning, and when the general manager calls at that hour, that's not good news.
I remember getting a phone call very early from my news director saying that Whitey had passed, and holding the phone for a second and just letting it sink in. It was much like the day when I learned that Jim O'Brien had passed, another Philadelphia icon, and then the two passings were somewhat similar in that you saw people on the street, and when they heard the news, you could just see their faces just be drawn, and sometimes you could see them cry. And
Rich Ashburn returned to his room at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Midtown shortly after last night's game. For those closest to him, it seemed like just another broadcast. But around 5 a.m., Ashburn called Phillies traveling secretary Eddie Ferenz for help. By the time Phillies trainer Jeff Cooper arrived at his room here on the 15th floor, the Phillies legend had passed away. His broadcasting partners spent today taking calls of condolence and trying to figure out how they would get through tonight's game.
He was, as good a friend as I've had, and it's going to be very strange without him. Whitey would have wanted us to go on, I know that, and so you still do a ball game. Certainly won't be the same, but you still do a ball game.
Somebody from the Phillies called Kathleen Sullivan, our city representative, about the fact that there was no place to hold a viewing that was big enough. And Kathleen and I thought about it and decided Memorial Hall would be a great place, and the Ashburn family said yes. And I thought maybe 3,000 or 4,000 fans would show up, and I was there as it opened up. And I couldn't believe the lines that were there when it opened up. But I came back later on, and 5 hours later, there were still incredible lines.
Never saw so many people, a lot of people say goodbye, and it's just a testament of how well and how well life was lived and how many people he touched.
The lines of people went down the street and around the block. I don't think Richie ever had any idea of how people loved him in town. And I saw people leaving little portable radios there and flowers there and photographs there.
The ceremony at Memorial Hall was a fitting tribute to this wonderful man. One young fan was inspired to write a song about it.
That was one of the most incredible, memorable days of my life. It was so touching to see so many people turn out. There was just love for Whitey everywhere.
We wore red, the thousands of us who'd come to say goodbye and pay their last respects. Miss Toughtown really loved you. I saw grown men who wept. Hey, Whitey man, I miss you. When I listen to Harry, going on without you. Good old Harry.
The next day, on a beautiful sun-spanked morning, a private funeral was held. Friends traveled in from all over the country to pay respects to their dear friend. Mayor Ed Rendell reflected on the impact of Richie's life on the city of Philadelphia.
Everybody can remember the first baseball game that their father and mother took them to. A couple of days ago in the gym that I work out at, a 31, 32-year-old man came up to me and said, "Oh, it's horrible about Richie." He said, "I grew up every night with my little transistor radio under the covers, listening to the games. And I grew up listening to Richie. He became a part of my family." And yesterday, a man left a transistor radio near Richie's casket. Because that transistor radio was his link with Richie, just like it was for so many of us. But Richie affected our lives for 50 years. The shut-ins, the nuns in convents, the richest and most powerful people in this town, and the children with their covers up over their ears, listening to games. Philadelphia and the whole Delaware Valley has lost, albeit an adopted son, one of its finest sons.
He was rich in friends. In friendship, perhaps the richest of men. Now he has reached the ultimate Hall of Fame, joining his dad, Neil, his twin sister, Donna, and his angel, Jan. And what would be his legacy to us? We grieve the loss of a wonderful man. As we leave here today, if we can make a difference in the life of just one person, make them laugh, bring them comfort, give them joy, as Whitey did for so many people, then Whitey's memory will be fulfilled. If you love Whitey, love one another. God bless you, pal. Somewhere on the gentle flowing plains of Nebraska, a small cemetery quietly marks the passage of time. The stones, many of which were carved by Richie's father, serve as monuments to the simple lives lived by the townspeople. But Tilden's most famous son chose to rest in his adopted city. Several miles to the south, another monument to Richie Ashburn has been created.
Richie Ashburn. He's with us today, and he will be with us every day.
Ashburn Alley serves as a kind of interactive memorial, a place where parents can pass the history of their favorite team along to their children, a place to tell some of the many stories about its namesake, a place to have fun, a great place to watch a ball game. I think Whitey would have liked that. Those of us that knew Whitey, those of us who were touched by him, owe it to the generations that follow to keep his spirit alive. Whitey will live in our hearts forever.
Through the years, the way we Yeah, he was number one when he